Okay, now I think everyone can hear me, right?
Yes.
Well, thanks to start off. Thank you for the invitation. So to prepare this presentation, I started with the most basic of things, a Google search. So this is it, post-COVID public space. And the results, well, as you can see, they are varied. They talk about adapting to the world to the new normal. And to summarize, we're talking about resilience, about the new normal, smart cities, technology, sustainability, masks, restaurants, bikes, tape. So there's a lot to be said about how we are now realizing how vital public spaces are, how necessary adapt our lives to this new normal, and how our lives have changed. What lives are we talking about? The dominant discourse of COVID in cities is built around a single narrative, assuming the crisis has been more or less the same. It establishes an ongoing story in 3 acts: business as usual, disrupted by the lockdown, empty streets and transformed routines, and a gradual return where we are revalorizing and rethinking the role of public space. And I use this image of l'Arc de Triomphe in Paris because first, it's very easy to find the before and after pictures of this emblematic place. And second, because as any French colleague will say, it's not every street in France, and it's not even any street in Paris. And Paris is not France. And this 3-act narrative is not the global narrative of urban life in a health crisis. This discourse fails to take into account other street lives and urban cultures that exist for a large part of the world, and the most vulnerable populations, who are dealing with the hardest aspects of the pandemic. Due to economic and social inequalities, other ways of organization of everyday life in public space already took place way before the pandemic happened. So for these sectors, this 3-act structure didn't happen, or didn't happen as neatly, if it did. For some populations, COVID-19 measures didn't imply a change, really, but only another constraint to deal with, along with the pre-existing complications of everyday street life. Sorry, for some, public space was never accessible to begin with. It was never accessible, nor inclusive, nor safe. Others already used public space for more than leisure or out of pre-existing needs. The pandemic, along with lockdown measures, exacerbate ongoing structural inequalities based on class, on race, income, or gender. And we can observe this at a micro level, meaning individuals that coexist in any given city, such as women, informal workers, racialized individuals, the elderly, essential workers, and homeless individuals. And also at a macro level, when we look at the countries of the Global South. Now, just to pick up an example. Women have a very poor perception of security in public space, even in normal times, due to sexual remarks, touching, rape, gender-related killings, etc. Conditions of everyday life in public space, such as poor lighting, low pedestrian traffic, and walking alone, present greater risk for females. So where in places where lockdowns were enforced, activity in streets dropped drastically during the day, and streets were desolate at night, except for informal workers in most cases. Some streets turn off. Since there's so this connectivity in public transit networks was reduced, which represented longer distance of walking on empty streets. Moreover, new empty spaces blossomed due to businesses closing during and after lockdowns. And so sexual violence in public spaces didn't stop for women during this crisis. Cases in Chile, in the UK, Canada, Nigeria, Kenya, the Philippines, India, the US, Mexico, they all have registered cases of sexual violence against women while they were exercising outdoors, while they were working in public work settings, traveling to and from work. For example, in Mexico, essential workers such as female doctors and nurses were attacked and denied access to public transportation, and informal workers who couldn't afford to stop working. And this is particularly striking when we consider that, for example, the sector of informal workers in South Asia represents a 95% and 89% female informal workers, 89% in sub-Saharan Africa and 59% in the Latin Americas and the Caribbean. So this takes us to the other level I was talking about, the macro level, regarding the Global South. So when we talk about the pandemic, lockdown and social distancing have proved to work in diverse contexts. Certain conditions facilitate these protocols. The prescribed protocols such as housing, mostly formal, clear distinction between the private and the public, between home and work, access to digital tools, access to water to wash hands easily and frequently, and formal employment. Now, these conditions are fairly common in the global north, and in the global south, they are fairly common only in elite neighborhoods. However, the conditions of urban life in the global south can be quite different when we consider that there exists reduced, shared, and unaffordable housing, informal and or auto-construct. Basic infrastructure is shared, such as toilets, kitchens, and water taps. There are high rates of unemployment. So as reference, informal workers in France represent 10% of total employment in France. And in Mexico, they represent 53%. So it's 53% of people who work on public space or that the livelihoods depend on mobility and contact with others. So in these conditions, lockdown and social distancing cannot be enforced, or at most only in the neighborhoods with higher resources. Technology that has been hailed as a way to keep going forward while on lockdown is still a luxury for many people. Again, referring to the case of Mexico, the Mexican government announced that classes would continue by TV, not virtually, because people do not have children and do not have access to internet or a tablet or a computer. Home office also is not possible for many. So people still have to go to work, even if they are not essential workers. And many others have lost their jobs, forcing them during this crisis to informal employment, meaning contact with people in the public space. So it's sort of a cycle we're seeing here. So life in public space didn't stop. It continued with masks and with gloves, but it kept going on. And amidst violence from common and organized crime, and now from law enforcement trying to keep things under control in the midst of the pandemic. So for these populations that don't exactly fit the three-act structure that we saw previously, COVID didn't reveal new vulnerabilities. The urban majority has always been vulnerable. The crisis only intensified the vulnerabilities that were already there. So I believe it's our responsibility to take into account these other narratives, these other urban lives, so that we as experts can give a voice to these vulnerable communities, and we can take them into consideration in the present and the future of the pandemic. Feel free to add me on any of my socials, and I will post this presentation and the transcript on the webpage on the bottom. Thank you very much.